Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare.
You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song. But that's it. You big.
Silence. That's what hung heavy in the air, not just in Hollywood, but across America. Not the silence of a forgotten joke, but the uneasy quiet that precedes an earthquake. For years, Jimmy Kimmel ruled late night, a beloved fixture, a voice of what many believed was reason, or at least predictable humor. He seemed untouchable, insulated by a gleaming studio, A-list guests, and the unwavering nod of Tinseltown. But then, an unlikely storm gathered. It wasn't a rogue comedian or a ratings blip. It was a calculated, devastating pincer movement from two of primetime's most relentless and sharp-witted figures, Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly. They didn't just critique him, they ripped open the very fabric of his carefully constructed persona, exposing a truth so uncomfortable, so jarring, it sent tremors through the entire late-night landscape.
Back in the day when I was on the primetime of Fox and you were on the primetime of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Pierce. I mean, occasionally they understood that they were in the game of making everyone laugh. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Colbert, Kimmel, Seth Meyers, who I struggle to even mention that guy's name. He's such an absolute I can't stand him. But anyway, it's just my thought bubble out loud.
All right. So a Republican has won an election, and you know what that means. Jimmy Carter has to stay alive for 4 more years. It's also time for liberals to tell themselves that they're still right about everything and their hysteria and delusions of persecution are perfectly normal. Yet right now, they're melting like that stick of butter Joy Behar keeps between her thighs to prevent chafing. Case in point, last night, all the other late-night hosts threw a hissy fit. It's too bad Tim Waltz is still grieving, or he could send them all a sack of industrial-strength tampons.
The panic in Kimmel's camp, though unstated, was palpable. Imagine the undisputed king of late night, draped in his perceived moral authority, suddenly stripped bare, his punchlines revealed as hollow, his tears as choreographed. What happens when the perceived smugness of a late-night institution collides head-on with the unyielding scrutiny of a seasoned journalist and the surgical satire of a comedian who truly understands biting wit? It wasn't just a critique, it was a verbal demolition, a public unmasking that left Jimmy clutching his teleprompter like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. This wasn't just a roast, it was a nuclear event, and the fallout was gloriously public and painfully, shockingly funny. Prepare yourself because the curtain has been pulled back, and what's been revealed about the man who once held court each night might forever change how you see him. This is the story of how late night's supposed conscience was utterly flattened, and how his reign began to unravel in real time.
We took a look at some of their reactions to the news of Trump's win. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great. Yeah, me neither.
Let's be honest, it was a terrible night last night. It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our climate. It was a terrible night for poor people, for our allies in Ukraine.
It's almost impossible to reconcile the Jimmy Kimmel of today with the persona that first rocketed him to fame. Rewind just a few years, and you'd find him co-hosting The Man Show, a cultural phenomenon that, for better or worse, reveled in unabashed masculinity, featuring bikini contests, beer pong tournaments, and general boisterous mayhem. He was the guy cracking crude jokes, donning a leather jacket, and reveling in the kind of unrefined humor that would send today's woke sensibilities into a tailspin. Yet, somewhere along the way, a dramatic metamorphosis occurred. He didn't just evolve. He rebranded himself with the desperation of a washed-up boy band member trying to go solo with an acoustic guitar and a vegan cookbook. The transformation was less an organic growth and more a strategic pivot, shedding the raunchy edge for a veneer of moral superiority worn like a custom-tailored bathrobe. Now, instead of comedic relief, you get what feels eerily like a middle school principal giving a TED Talk on morality, except somehow less charismatic and infinitely more self-righteous. This bottled smugness, perpetually glaring at anyone who dares to vote right of Bernie Sanders, has become his signature, a stark and often unsettling contrast to the guy who once orchestrated bikini pageants. He now sees himself as the last bastion, the final defense against whatever GOP monster he imagines lurking under his bed, a dramatic and utterly unconvincing departure from his origins.
Late night host Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air after taking the summer off. He's missed a lot. Kimmel says if you're not vaccinated, you shouldn't get a hospital ICU bed. But I'm not sure if Jimmy was being sincere because he wasn't crying. Anyway, it's just funny hearing someone say, "I see you," who nobody actually sees. Look, I don't want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were changing the channel.
You know how much it costs to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show? I guarantee you it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcasts out of Maine in literally has 21 million views. Okay? 21 million views. Whereas, as I point out, on ABC, a massive network that comes into your home for free, that you have to make no effort to find, at best, Jimmy Kimmel can get 1.5 million. He needs to have a little self-perspective before going out there and hurling these insults because he looks a little silly.
This dramatic shift brought with it a peculiar and frankly exhausting on-air phenomenon, the tears. Jimmy Kimmel cries more on air than a Netflix documentary series about abandoned puppies during a rainstorm. Every policy change, every tragedy, every headline, every perceived slight to his worldview. There he is, predictably choking up, blinking hard, waiting for the applause to wash over his carefully choreographed vulnerability. It's become a predictable ritual, a tearful tick that you can practically set your watch by. The man's tear ducts practically have their own PR agent. But here's the devastating truth unearthed by his critics. When jokes get replaced by hashtags and punchlines are run through 3 rounds of HR sensitivity training, it's no longer satire. It's sanitized outrage with a laugh track, less the sharp wit of a comedian, and more the extended self-important rant of a Facebook activist with a surprisingly large studio budget. His monologues aren't designed to elicit genuine, spontaneous laughter. They're performances of moral gymnastics, desperately scanning the crowd for the obligatory clapter. Because that's the real game now. Not humor, but applause for opinions. He doesn't tell jokes. He performs concerns, as if waiting for America to collectively thank him for feeling things on its behalf. The impact? A half laugh, half lecture. Monologue written with all the edge of a spoon and the comedic impact of a wet paper towel, leaving his audience with the distinct impression that they've accidentally tuned into a hostage video rather than a late night show.
Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
But beyond the performative emotional displays and the self-appointed moral high ground, there's a stark, undeniable reality check that few in the insulated world of late night seem willing to acknowledge: the cold, hard numbers. While Kimmel pontificates from his state-of-the-art LED-floored studio. His viewership is shrinking, rapidly approaching the point of irrelevance. Just last week, his average overall viewers hovered at a mere 1.5 million. In the coveted key demographic, a paltry 236,000. To truly grasp the magnitude of this decline, consider the contrast. Tucker Carlson, broadcasting from what appeared to be a rustic cabin in Maine, a setup costing next to nothing, regularly, pulled in numbers 3 times higher than Kimmel during his Fox News Channel run. And his post-Fox independent videos, created with virtually no studio budget, have soared past 21 million views, some reaching that number in a single day. Kimmel, on the other hand, is aired on ABC, a massive network that beams directly into homes for free, requiring no effort to find. Yet, he barely scrapes 1.5 million viewers on a good night. The man who boasts about curing comedy and inventing empathy needs a serious dose of self-perspective before he hurls insults. He thinks reading mean tweets is peak innovation, and tearfully narrating policy debates is his civic duty. But when multiple reports allege that people in his studio audience are changing the channel during taping, it's clear his relevance is not just tripping, it's collapsing under its own weight, leaving him looking more than a little silly.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Several people shared in this achievement. Winner number 1, Jimmy Kimmel. For the 4th time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times he's second only to Justin Trudeau in his fondness for the practice. Yes, some of the very same celebrities who wanted you to believe they were horrified after yours truly said in 2018 that people used to don dark makeup in order to imitate well-known black celebrities and it wasn't a big deal. Absolutely ate up the performance by Hollywood darling Mr. Kimmel.
Carson cried like a baby over Ronald Reagan getting elected. Yeah, neither do I. And you know why he didn't? Because his wife didn't keep his balls in a Tupperware container next to a box of tofu burgers. But the killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had a penis. Love you, Bruce.
And then there's the uncomfortable truth. The past Kimmel and his Hollywood patrons seem to wish would simply disappear, swept under the plush carpets of his gilded studio. His repeated, unapologetic use of blackface. The transcript explicitly highlights his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone, a deeply problematic imitation that was somehow deemed acceptable for primetime consumption. And let's not forget the equally troubling sketch as Oprah in a fat suit, complete with an inner city sort of urban accent, instructing her to darn those socks. This is the same Jimmy Kimmel, whom adoring Hollywood stars, many of whom publicly express horror and feigned outrage at any mention of offensive makeup or insensitive portrayals by others, enthusiastically cheer on at award shows, handing him hosting gigs with unwavering approval. It's a glaring, almost dizzying hypocrisy. The very same celebrities who condemn others for actions taken in the distant past, or even for perceived missteps, are quick to embrace Kimmel, who donned dark makeup multiple times to imitate well-known black celebrities. He once hosted The Man Show, known for its explicit content, objectification, and often crude humor, and now he preaches coastal sanctimony from a position of immense wealth and privilege. This past isn't just a footnote in his biography, it's a stark and damning contrast to the self-appointed guardian of woke sensibilities he now portrays. The question hangs in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. How can someone so aggressively cosplay as the conscience of America while conveniently ignoring or being forgiven for such a deeply troubling history? The silence from his Hollywood allies is deafening, exposing a double standard that's both hypocritical and deeply unsettling.
Jimmy's career peaked with busty girls on trampolines. Now the only boob we see is him. He once co-hosted The Man Show. Now he's sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual cycle.
Whose blackface costumes included his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone.
Now, Karl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time.
And let's not forget Oprah in a fat suit.
15 minutes a day is all you need to get your heart rate up to where...
Please, Miss Oprah, you're crushing my... Sorry, Miss Oprah.
This glaring hypocrisy and the decline of his comedic prowess is where Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly stepped in, not merely as critics, but as surgical demolition experts. Greg Gutfeld, a man who manages to be funnier in 5 unscripted seconds than Jimmy Kimmel often is in 5 written hours, absolutely flattened him. He didn't even need to aim high, because as Gutfeld eloquently put it, you don't need a ladder to reach a guy who's tripped over his own relevance. Watching Gutfeld dissect Kimmel is akin to witnessing someone deflate an inflatable clown with a toothpick. Swift, effortless, and deeply satisfying. Gutfeld's approach to comedy is a swift kick to hypocrisy, delivered without kid gloves or moral posturing. Just classic biting satire that serves as a visceral reminder of what late night used to be before it devolved into an audition reel for MSNBC guest spots. While Kimmel monologues in an empty echo chamber filled with the sound of his own virtue, Gutfeld actually engages, actually jokes, and unforgivably to Jimmy, actually gets laughs. And then there's Megyn Kelly, equally devastating, operating with surgical precision. There were no frills, no flinching, just unvarnished facts and a long overdue reality check delivered with the kind of clarity and directness that made Jimmy look like he'd stumbled onto the wrong soundstage entirely. She didn't need to yell, she didn't need gimmicks. She simply reminded everyone with quiet authority that Jimmy Kimmel isn't brave or bold or insightful. He's just an aging host trying to cosplay as the conscience of America, all while cashing massive Disney checks and performing anti-establishment rhetoric from a set with LED flooring that costs millions to produce. Their combined message was an undeniable truth. Kimmel's entire shtick is built on a lie, a carefully constructed facade that confuses being loud with being effective, masking deep-seated performance anxiety as genuine activism. His dissent, they argued, isn't rebellion, it's a commercially viable, corporate-approved performance. The inevitable consequence of this transformation, this exposure, and this profound disconnect from reality is a shrinking stage, an echo chamber filled only with the self-congratulatory sound of his own virtue. His audience sounds less like they're genuinely laughing and more like they're clapping out of sheer obligation, as if someone just held up a cue card that explicitly reads, "Pretend he's funny." He's delivering jokes to people who came for therapy, not comedy, and even the therapy, frankly, is substandard. His jokes land with the force of a balloon tap, deflating before they ever reach their intended mark. You can practically hear the collective sigh of boredom in the studio when yet another Republicans are bad bit rolls out, feeling less like fresh humor and more like a preheated hot pocket of recycled material, utterly devoid of spice, bite, or originality. It's always the same condescending chuckle, as if he's patiently explaining how democracy works to a room full of toddlers. While he desperately tries to outwoke the internet, his audience keeps shrinking at an alarming rate. Turns out, people genuinely don't want to be scolded nightly by a millionaire with a god complex and a comedic style stuck firmly in reverse. He's not dangerous, he's not challenging, he's safe, polished, and the very embodiment of corporate-approved rebellion. He thinks he's punching up, but he's really just throwing predictable haymakers into the void, waiting for empty Twitter likes to validate his existence. Jimmy Kimmel isn't controversial, he's commercialized dissent. He's rebellion with a ratings clause. He's the kid who tattles on other kids at recess, and then, with manufactured earnestness, gives a long-winded speech about unity during the school assembly. He's just there now, like a static screensaver you forgot to turn off, smiling, blinking, and gently reminding everyone that, once upon a time, he used to be cool. So here we are, watching Jimmy Kimmel slowly, undeniably fade into the background. A man who once peaked with busty girls on trampolines is now, as one critic brutally put it, sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual cycle. He's a once funny guy who now spends more time virtue signaling than joke telling, his career seemingly spiraling into a self-inflicted comedic coma. Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld didn't destroy Jimmy Kimmel, they didn't have to. He's been diligently doing that himself, one tearful, self-righteous, and increasingly irrelevant monologue at a time. All they did was hold up a mirror, and the reflection wasn't pretty. It looked tired, predictable, and about 2 punchlines, away from complete irreversible irrelevance. Perhaps there's still a glimmer of hope. Maybe Jimmy can somehow stage a miraculous comeback, ditch the moralizing, find a new angle, and rediscover what it truly means to actually be funny, to provoke thought and laughter without lecturing. Or maybe, just maybe, he'll simply cry about it instead. And if history, particularly his recent history, is any indication, crying about it might just be the season finale of The Jimmy Kimmel Show, streaming now on every channel that sadly confuses manufactured earnestness for genuine entertainment. Because at this point, Kimmel isn't just phoning it in, he's texting it in from a wine bar in Malibu, sipping a Chardonnay labeled Tears of the Common Man, his idea of connecting with real people confined to posting selfies with celebrities who've never been within 50 feet of a grocery store. Meanwhile, his punchlines are so stale they should come vacuum sealed, yet he continues to strut across the stage nightly, utterly convinced he's single-handedly cured comedy and invented empathy. Spoiler alert, he did neither. He just slapped a sad face on sarcasm and called it profound political commentary. The stage, the vast, expansive stage of American culture and comedy, is far, far bigger than Jimmy's self-indulgent pity party. It's time for real voices, sharp, unapologetic, and honest, to carve out space where laughter actually means something again.